I experience shame on the daily. But because I have now healed from it and I'm in a maintenance stage, when shame comes up, my response is, oh, I see that. I know what that is. That's shame. And I know what shame wants me to do. It wants me to hide. And what I'm going to do instead is the exact opposite of what shame wants me to do. And I'm going to speak up.
That's Dr. Zoe Shaw. And if you think that your shame story is too messy, too complex, too deeply embedded to ever overcome it, then this conversation is about to change everything you think you know. I'm Dr. Therese, and welcome back to Checking In. This show is for the eldest daughters, the anxious overachievers, the people who look like they have it all together, but they're secretly or quietly exhausted. My mission is to help people love their lives so they never want to leave them. And that starts with building a life you don't need a vacation from. This show is like having a therapist in your pocket to meet you exactly where you are and to give you encouragement exactly when you need it. And new episodes drop every Thursday. Some shame simply doesn't heal the way that we've been taught. You can be vulnerable and you can receive all the external compassion in the world, and that shame, it doesn't go away. And if you're someone who looks like you have it all perfectly together on the outside while you're secretly crumbling on the inside, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've done the work. You've been to therapy. You've read Brené Brown. And still, there's this voice inside that says, if they really knew me, they wouldn't love me. Dr. Zoe Shaw isn't just a brilliant psychologist who understands complex shame on a clinical level. She lived it. Teen pregnancy, forced adoption, a dysfunctional marriage, the devastating belief that her daughter's genetic disorder was punishment for her past. And for years, she doubled down on achievement, trying to outrun the shame that was slowly suffocating her, until she figured out how to untangle it. Her new book, Stronger in the Difficult Places, just launched this week. And it's not just a memoir, it's a roadmap from people whose shame feels impossible to escape. In this conversation, Dr. Zoe is going to walk us through why complex shame is entirely different from the shame that we've been taught, and why it requires a completely different approach to heal. The 7 types of shame that show up in our lives, and yes, if you're like me, you probably have more than one. How high achievers, like you and me, use accomplishment to hide, and why this actually keeps us stuck. The surprising strategy she used to overcome imposter syndrome, seeking out 100 rejections in a year, and what healing looks like when you stop trying to make shame disappear and instead learn to see it coming. But first, I think I should tell you how Dr. Zoe and I met, because it's part of the reason why this conversation means so much to me. So back in 2018, I was desperate. I wanted to show up on Instagram and offer mental health education, but I felt completely alone. So in that desperation, I searched for other mental health professionals who were also interested in being on social media, and I found Dr. Zoe. And basically, I slid into her DMs. I was like, Zoe, I want to be friends with you. Not quite like that, but basically I said that I was interested in creating a community, a mastermind of other mental health professionals on social media, and that we could meet regularly and support one another and learn from one another. And what started out as professional networking has become so much more. The women in this mastermind have become like sisters to me, and we have supported each other through life's ups and downs, like some real intense highs and lows. And we've also been able to witness each other's amazing achievements, writing books, appearing on shows, doing stuff for Oprah. I mean, these women are absolutely incredible, and I would not be where I am today without them. Dr. Zoe was there for me during some of my most difficult moments, and I've also been able to be by her side during her healing journey. And now, 6-7 years later, she's here for this conversation. If conversations like this mean something to you, then remember to subscribe and hit the bell or get notifications. You're joining thousands of other people who also value making meaningful connections and making their life more meaningful. Now, let me introduce you to my friend, Dr. Zoe Shaw.
It's crazy to think about how long that we've been friends. And also, beyond just the professional, I think we've really navigated through some of life's real ups and downs.
Yes.
And so I don't think anyone who necessarily knows us from our social media would know that we've had this backstory and connection of supporting each other. And through all the ups and downs, we've also seen some amazing wins. I mean, like most of the women in our group have published a book, have done shows. You know, there's just so much to be proud of. So now can we talk about why
Yes.
we're celebrating this week? Would you share a little bit about
Yes.
your book?
This is a hard-earned 1 week for me. This is the week that my book, Stronger in the Difficult Places, launches or has launched. It launched 2 days ago. 3 days ago, we're on the third now. This is a book that has taken me probably close to a decade to get to this point. And it is both a memoir and a self-help book. It's, the story of a part of my life, really how I developed complex shame. And the point of the book is to share my story and also help someone else untangle complex shame for themselves. So we are celebrating because the book has launched.
Yeah, we are. And I want you to know I'm 40 pages in. I've got my book here. I'm 40 pages in.
Oh my
I
goodness.
love it so much. I love it so much, and I can't wait to get through it and learn from you with every chapter. But the first 40 pages have been already such a lesson for me. First, I just want to check in with you as a human being.
Yes.
And so this big week of all weeks, I guess I just want to know, like, if there was a headline that you would use to describe how you're doing right now, what would the headline be? Just, it can be fun. It doesn't have to be serious, whatever you're feeling.
Yeah, the first word that came into my mind was euphoric. It has...
Wow.
Yeah, it has really been, and I didn't do anything huge to celebrate on the day. My partner and I, we went to dinner and we just kind of hung out and soaked it all in. And I spent a lot of time on my laptop because there was a lot of work to be done. But as the days have continued and hearing from people who have read the book, are reading the book, and the things that they are getting out of it, it's just a confirmation to me. And this is what I want other women who are listening as well, a confirmation that my shame story was not for nothing, that the words and the strength that I've developed as a result of it have been able to not only, I was able to heal, and that's a great thing when we're able to heal, but when we're able to use our own healing to help other people heal, it's an amazing gift. And, the ripple effects that go literally, the legacy that we're leaving. And so for me, the euphoria is, it's great that my book is done and out there, but it's hearing back from the other people. And it's just a confirmation. Oh yeah, this is why I did this. And it's good.
It's actually making a difference, and you're
Right.
already feeling
Yes.
that in the first week,
Yeah.
which is just incredible. And I can't wait to feel that one day. I hope to feel that one day with a book.
Oh, you will. I know it. I know it. I'm putting that out there for you. It's
I
coming.
receive it. So I love that you talk already from the beginning about like who you have in mind and who you want to touch with this book. And I think so many of the people that connect with my work are women, and maybe like some very self-aware men who are overwhelmed.
Yep.
They are overachievers. They are people who look like they've got it all going on the outside and might feel like they're crumbling on the inside. In so many ways, this person is a version of myself that I've been throughout my life. And so, I want to start with just your title and your message, Stronger in the Difficult Places. Can you talk a little bit about what that means for you and how it connects to your story?
Yes. I'll share briefly about my story so that those listening can get an understanding. So I grew up this little black girl in an all-white farming community. I started out in Washington, D.C., very diverse. And then when we were 8, we moved to this white farming community with lots of Mennonites and Amish. And I was obviously very different. And I learned very quickly that something was different about me. And especially my skin color was perceived as less than. So I developed some racial identity shame in that. And then when I was 15, I got pregnant. And I was in a fundamental Christian home. My dad was a prominent doctor in the community. And when my parents found out, obviously their response was, this is not happening here. And so they sent me away to a pregnancy home in Virginia with the understanding that I would come back without a child. And me being the compliant, already burgeoning codependent girl that I did exactly what was expected of me. And I left my baby after giving birth unmedicated in a hospital, and left her there in Virginia and went back home to pretend like nothing had happened. And so in that process, number one, I did not have a language for what I was experiencing. I was experiencing both a deep shame and grief, and I had no language for either. And so what I did was I did what shame asks us to do, and I hid, and we'll talk about that later. And I covered up all of that pain with achievements. And so I achieved very highly academically. I was also a very accomplished athlete. I got a scholarship to UCLA. I competed at UCLA and on a very high level, even before that, and was coached by Olympic athletes. And I just doubled down on accomplishments to really try to run from my shame. I got married very early I met my husband at 18, married him at 19, which is another issue in the purity culture that drives a lot of women that grow up in that purity culture to marry early because of the whole sex out of marriage issue. And so I got into a very dysfunctional marriage and continued all of my doubling down on just high achieving, which I did very well. And I did that really well through my bachelor's, through my master's, through my doctorate, until I had 2 children, 2 boys, and then I had my first kept daughter. And she was born with a severe genetic disorder. And sitting in the NICU, not knowing whether she was going to live or die, that dam of shame that I was holding so strongly literally broke in that moment. I was convinced that God was punishing me for placing my first daughter for adoption, and she was punishing me and my daughter with this, genetic disorder. And I really spiraled for a number of years after that. And eventually I got to a point where I was trying to work on overcoming my shame, at the same time holding this deep secret about placing my daughter for adoption and helping other people work as a clinician, on their shame. And like you said, looking like I had it all together. Eventually, first I had this experience of reuniting with my daughter when she was 18, which was a beautiful healing experience. And in many ways, it was kind of pushing up against both my feeling like I had been exonerated on one level, and then also my shame, because even after I reunited with my daughter, I still continued the secret because everybody in my sphere didn't know about her. And I had married somebody who, I will talk later about the idea of co-signing. I married somebody who co-signed with my shame. And so he did not want me to disclose any of this either. So I fast forward because I'm trying to make this fast. At my father's funeral, my daughter, my daughter Sarah, who I placed for adoption, was going to be at my dad's funeral. He died suddenly because my parents had met her. And that was a point when it was really, I can't even say it was a decision that I made, although it was a decision. But I had to decide, am I going to ask Sarah to make herself a secret? Or am I going to disclose, right? Because as that mama bear instinct rose in me, I had held the secret. I had held this burden that I was not going to ask her to do it. And so at my father's funeral, I disclosed to my whole family about her. And it was a whole kind of lifetime crazy moment. But that was the beginning of some of my healing. And then I read this book by Tarana Burke, and I always forget the name of the book, You Are Your Best Thing. And in that book, she talked about a shame that she experienced that was not healed by what Brene Brown talks about, vulnerability and then receiving external compassion. And Brene Brown wrote a foreword in Tarana Burke's book, and she said, I know my research is sound, so I know this works. But lived experience trumps research. So she kind of acknowledged something's going on there, but I know my research is sound. And so it really started me on this path to trying to understand, what is this type of shame that is not healed by the Brene Brown simple type of shame, is what I call it now. And that's how I began to understand complex shame in myself, and I began to understand it in my clients, and I began to figure out how to untangle it. So that's how this book came to be. Long story.
Wow.
Yes. And so when
Wow.
I say stronger in the difficult places, I have come to a point because I used to think that my shame actually precluded me from doing the things that I wanted to do in this world. And what I have found is that my shame has actually been my biggest strength when I'm able to voice it and live in it and share it with other people.
Obviously, hearing your story, I think, makes so many of us think about our own shame stories.
Yes, yes.
And for me, I'm thinking about one of the big chapters of my shame story was losing my brother to suicide.
Yes. Yeah.
And, I was already a therapist at the time, and it was obviously something very unexpected. And I think one thing that I've wrestled with a lot is recognizing that I can use the horrible things I've experienced to help
Right,
other
yeah.
people. But I also think there's this part of me that struggles with, like, I don't want that to be my story, or I don't want that to be the thing. I don't choose this. And it's such a battle sometimes with what you do with this thing that you've experienced. But I do think, and I think this is kind of what the book speaks to, is there is so much power in being able to choose to find redemption somehow.
Yes.
Through the shame experience that you've been through.
Right.
You mentioned a couple things I'm really curious about. So you mentioned co-signing, and also maybe it would make sense for us to go back a moment and talk a little bit more about this complex shame, because
Yes.
so many people are familiar with Brene Brown's work. She's amazing. Love her.
Yes. Love her.
But there's so much nuance, and I think that's the thing about science and research is we're always finding new facets to what we think we know. Complex shame seems like a new facet that is new to me, and I think I'd love to invite you to just help enlighten us in terms of how that looks compared to what you said was simple shame.
Absolutely. First, I just want to address what you said, because when you said, I don't want that to be my story, that, of course, is shame. But I think we also have to recognize that, number one, it is your story, but we can choose what we focus on. So it's a matter of just accepting that it is my story. I don't get to choose what my story is, right? The past is the past and it's part of it. It doesn't mean I have to focus on it in my work. Just like my daughter, like I don't do special needs work, even though I have a special needs daughter. And although I do a little bit, it's not my focus, right? But it's part of my story. And so I think when we're able to just accept that it is my story, and now I just have to figure out what's my voice and how do I want to incorporate it into that.
It's very mindful, right? It's this idea of like just acceptance, and things aren't always what we choose, but there is power in acceptance. And I appreciate that.
So complex shame. First, it's funny because shame is such a kind of negative thing. And when I talk about shame, I always want to tell people I love to talk about shame because there's so much hope in it. And that's why at the end of every chapter in my book, I offer a piece of hope, because it can feel like a very daunting topic. So let me explain the difference. First, we have to understand the difference between guilt and shame. And Brene Brown has talked about this a lot, and some people might already know this, but some people may not. So guilt is an emotion and a body state that simply says to you, because all emotions send us messages, right? And the message that guilt sends to us is, I have done something wrong. I have broken my moral code. So that's going to be different for everybody. But guilt says, I've broken my moral code. And so when you've broken your moral code and done something wrong, there's things that you can do about it. It's not about who you are. It's a behavior, right? And so you can apologize. You can go back and try to repair. And sometimes we've done things and we can't actually fully repair. We can try. But what we can do is we can decide, I will not do this again. So guilt is a really healthy, when it's valid, sometimes it's not valid. When it's valid, it's a really healthy emotion that allows us to make changes in our life towards something good and better, right? So valid guilt is healthy. Shame tells us a very different thing. And it is very much a physiological state as well as a emotional and psychological state. And the message that shame sends, the message that is deep, is I am wrong. I am unworthy. So if that is who you are as a person, then there's nothing for you to do except hide. And so shame is an emotion that makes us hide. in my opinion, my professional opinion, and I'm convinced about this, is that shame is unhealthy in all aspects. The thing about shame is that it distances us. It makes us hide. And when we hide, we're distancing ourselves from people. It distances us in our relationships, in our work, in our life, in all aspects. It distances us even from ourselves. And so shame in and of itself is a very unhealthy emotion. So the difference, though, between shame, simple shame, and complex shame is that with simple shame, when we are able to get to a place of talking about it and we receive external compassion, the shame, just like Brene Brown talks about, actually dissipates. It goes away. When we understand, oh, they get me. I'm not weird and crazy. This is part of, humanity. Your shame dissipates. And so that's why vulnerability and experiencing external compassion is so important. But with complex shame, two things happen when we express vulnerability and look for external compassion. The first is that because of the way complex shame develops, when someone gives us external compassion, when we say something and someone goes, oh, that wasn't your fault, or I get it, or I understand, they give us that compassion, there's a part of us inside that says, oh, you don't really understand. If you really knew all the things, you wouldn't be giving me compassion. And the reason for that, and so because of that, complex shame stays. And the reason why is because complex shame gets so attached to our identity, and then we do so many things as we're running from it to sabotage ourselves, hurt other people. All of that gets attached to the shame, and so we're not able to receive any external compassion about it until we untangle it. The second thing that can sometimes happen with complex shame is that, and this happens especially with marginalized communities, and that's the type of shame Tarana Burke was talking about, is that when we talk about our shame, what happens instead of someone saying, oh, I get it, is they gaslight us. And they say, oh, you probably misunderstood. I'm sure it didn't happen that way. They tell us that our reality didn't happen, right? Wasn't real. And so all that does with our shame is it makes it dive deeper. So those are two ways that complex shame is developed and maintained.
I can see why you call it complex, by the way, because it's complicated.
The third factor that comes into complex shame, and that is our temperament. So we are born with a temperament. It interacts with our environment to create a personality, right? And so many people are born with what I call an internalizer type of temperament. And this can be associated with our personality as well. So people tend to be either internalizers or externalizers. And that's what we do with our shame. So if we look at people who are very toxic, they are externalizing all of their shame and pushing it out on everybody else, right? Internalizers tend to be those codependents, those people who take on all the responsibility, very accomplished, very driven women.
Yep.
Internalizers, we believe that we can and should hold it all and do it all. And yet we also blame ourselves and take it very personally. And so people who tend to be internalizers tend to also have complex shame because they are attaching all of that blame to themselves. So those are kind of the three facets of complex.
Yeah, I just keep wanting to exhale, like, whoo, I feel the heaviness of this. One of my biggest struggles is perfectionism, and it's like completely rooted in a shame story. And it's overwhelming because I think the thing that makes you feel okay, like thinking everybody likes you, doing all the good things, can also be the thing that hurts you in so many ways. So I actually wrote down some quotes of yours from your book, and this one was really powerful to me, speaking to what you just said. You said, guilt usually tells the truth. Shame always lies.
Always. Yes, it always lies because it is global and tells you that you are unworthy. It's a lie.
Okay, so here we are. Let's say, folks are listening to this conversation and they're like, that's me. The next question they would ask, the next one I'm curious about is, okay, so now that I know, what do I do? What do I do next?
Do? Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And that's where the hope comes in because there is hope. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have written this book. The first thing I want you to do, and now that you hear that, I know a lot of people are going, oh, that's me, or I see that. And what do I do now? The first thing I want you to do is start to pay attention in your life because the way that you find shame is everywhere you want to hide. So anytime you think, oh, I don't want them to see that, or I don't want them to know, or I want to cover that up, that is where your shame is. And now I've just given you a tool to find it. And when you see it, now it's time to start paying attention and to start unraveling it. So I give 9 steps in my book to working through shame. It is not a simple thing. It is a very doable thing. And, obviously freedom is on the other side, but it starts with really understanding your original shame stories and also understanding the types of shame. So I can go through the types of shame real quickly, but
Sure,
understanding
please.
where your predominant shame stories originate, because those are the messages. So when I talk about those messages and I talk about what I call the phantom critic starts usually in childhood, sometime in your early development, right? And when we leave certain situations, leave toxic relationships, leave places that we've had really negative messages, we imagine that we are leaving all of that behind. But what we do instead is we pack up all those messages and we take them with us and we repeat them to ourselves on the daily. And so we need to understand where those shame messages began and what the messages are that we are continuing in our life now. So the types of shame that I've outlined in the book, and I know we don't have time to go into all of them, but if you want to dive into some of them, I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
One is religious shame.
Mm.
And there's so much shame that gets attached to religion and faith that is just really steeped in children very young. Purity culture is a completely shame-filled culture, and especially the Christian church. Then
I feel
there's
like we
God.
could do a whole episode on that, by the way.
We could. We could. And then there's body shame, and that is really about how our body looks, right? And we all have some level of body shame just because we can talk about shame and culture in our society as well. Well, let's talk about it a little bit because the reality is that we have used shame as a tool in our society for centuries, forever, really. And the reason why is because on the outside, it looks like it works. And it's used especially in the church. Because on the outside, when you shame people, their behavior looks like it's changing. And so we think
Right.
it works. But research has shown that when you shame people, their behaviors don't change, they just go underground and they actually get worse. And so, parents shame children because, it's a tool. But what we know is that the tool does not work in the way that we want it to, but we use it to control society. So there's religious shame, there's body shame, there's hereditary shame. Now, that is a shame that is passed down through generations. And I talk about in my book how it both gets passed down familially and psychologically, but also literally genetically. And we know that trauma gets passed down, and we also know that shame is attached to trauma, and that gets passed down multi-generationally. So then there's gender shame. And gender, different from body shame, and not necessarily about sexuality, is about feeling like there's something about the way that you express your gender that is not the same as everybody else. That you feel not feminine enough or too feminine, or any kind of messages you've gotten about you not being acting the way that's aligned with your gender. Then there's racial shame, and I think that's pretty obvious about racial shame and what we have in our society. And then there's trauma shame. Everyone with trauma, severe trauma, I would say, also has complex shame. And then there's imposter syndrome shame. And that's the shame that probably a lot of your women who are listening
Yep.
definitely feel in their workplaces and their career, is this sense of I don't know enough. I don't really belong here. I have to do more, work harder because there's kind of something wrong with me. I'm not as good as everybody else. And that sabotages us in our work. So those are the types of shame.
I mean, I think I can resonate almost with every single category in a certain way.
Correct.
For imposter syndrome, again, because I think so many people relate to it. Alana Mayer, the Olympian, talked about how she does not feel imposter syndrome. And I was like, girl, I am so jealous of you. I don't know what that's like. And so I think that really, I'm so curious about where that comes from and why so many high achievers have it. And I'm just to add on to that, because there's so many good gems in here, but also that what you said about generational, I know there's a study about earthworms carrying, like you can see in there in this research, that they showed evidence of the trauma from previous generations, which is absolutely fascinating. But it actually made me want to go back to what you were saying earlier about, was it someone that signs off on your shame? Because I feel like that's part of this, cosigns, that the system, there's like a systemic contributor to shame. Could we take a minute to talk about that? Because I think that's something I haven't heard before.
Yes. So part of complex shame is, remember how I said we carry those toxic messages?
Yep.
And when we look for people, and this is really mostly on a subconscious level, we look
Mm-hmm.
for people who co-sign with our shame, meaning they kind of agree with the exact kind of shame that we have and they continue to perpetuate it in our life. And we tend to do that in our closest relationships, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
partners, deep friendships. And what happens is when we're in this kind of echo chamber, we almost don't recognize our shame because everybody feels the same. My husband absolutely agreed, my ex-husband
Mm-hmm.
absolutely agreed that we should keep this a secret, that it was a terrible thing that we shouldn't tell people about because we don't want people to think that, and other
Mm-hmm.
people I might have met in the world would not have felt that way. But I managed to find the one man who
Mm-hmm.
co-signed with my shame. And we do this in many ways. And as a result, it precludes us from healing because we feel that everybody feels the same way we do. But what we don't understand is that we've brought those people into our
Mm.
world to co-sign with the things that we believe.
So I've heard this sometimes referred to as like self-fulfilling prophecy or something along those lines.
Mhm.
And I don't like that because I think it kind of blames the person carrying the shame as if it's their fault or that they chose
Mhm.
this. Could you speak to that? Like, what do you think about that?
Ooh, okay. So one of the steps, and this is possibly a little bit controversial. One of the steps
Mm-hmm.
in overcoming shame, complex shame, is really taking that full accountability. And let's talk about something as severe as like a rape or an assault.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if we look at something like that, we know that if you are a victim, it wasn't your fault, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, what we do often as therapists when we're working in trauma is that we will affirm for our client, it was not your fault. We try to get them to understand how they can kind of release that blame. The problem with that is that it doesn't work with the way that our brain works. And that is
Hmm.
why complex shame continues, because our brain knows when we've experienced something like victimization that
Mm-hmm.
there were many, many instances, microseconds, that we made choices within that experience that we then blame ourselves for.
Mm-hmm.
And for somebody else just saying it's not your fault, it doesn't work. And so, what we actually have to do, and I know this
Hmm.
feels like victim blaming, but it's
Mm-hmm.
actually working with our brain, is we
Mm-hmm.
need to say, what do I blame myself for? How can I take accountability for that? How can I take accountability for something I was not even aware I was doing and co-sign and finding my ex-husband to co-sign with my shame? That was
Mm-hmm.
something I did not consciously do, and yet I
Mm-hmm.
did, right? And so we can say it's not my fault, but instead, if I
Mm-hmm.
say, I did that,
Mm-hmm.
and how can I forgive myself for that choice that I made? And the thing that I love, the quote that I love about forgiveness
Mm-hmm.
is Lily Tomlin's quote. And the quote is, forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past. And I love that quote because it's not
Wow.
attached to anyone,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Yeah.
attached to them, me. I'm just giving up all hope that my past could have been different. I'm
Mm-hmm.
recognizing also that all behavior makes sense in its context. And so all the decisions I've made that have hurt me, that have hurt other people, if you go back in someone's life from the moment they were born and the temperament they had and the personality that they developed, every single decision they made makes sense. Now,
Mm-hmm.
right or wrong, we're not talking about it because,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, some things are right, some things are wrong. It's not about morality, it's about understanding behavior, right? And so if you
Mm-hmm.
understand that every single decision you made, even co-signing,
Mm-hmm.
finding someone to co-sign with your shame, even
Yeah.
in the midst of victimization, it made sense. And if you can acknowledge it and give up
Mm-hmm.
all hope of a better past, that begins to untangle your shame. I
Wow.
know it sounds like victim blaming, but it's actually the way that our brain works.
I'm so grateful for the nuance. And I think pointing out that just telling someone it's not their fault, talking about how that actually can impact, I think is important for us to know, especially for maybe the helpers and healers, the therapists that are
Yeah.
listening to this conversation. And I think kind of the picture that came into my mind as you described what we can do and kind of describing how to hold this is I kind of like that you suggest what sounds like putting on the hat of a scientist and getting curious. You're
Yes.
connecting dots, you know, you're saying, okay, well, these things led to this or whatnot, but it's not blaming, it's just getting curious and connecting dots.
Yes. It leads towards acceptance. It's just understanding that it
Mm-hmm.
all makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I do want to talk about the hope because the
Mm-hmm.
hope is that when you are able to go through the mess, and I talk about like this messy closet that you're taking all the stuff out, right? When you're able
Mm-hmm.
to go through the mess of untangling your shame, then you get to a place of what I call maintenance. And the beautiful place of maintenance is it's not that shame no longer exists. I hate it when someone's like, oh, we're going to just heal that and it's going to go away. You're never going to feel it again. I
Mm-hmm.
experience shame on the daily. But because I have now healed from it and I'm in a maintenance stage, when shame comes up, my response is, oh, I see that. I know what that is. That's shame. And I know what shame wants me to do. It wants me to hide. And what I'm going to do instead is the exact opposite of what shame wants me to do. And I'm going to speak up. And so I literally imagine myself on the side of a river and there's like water just flowing by. And
Mm-hmm.
shame comes and I see it, I recognize it, I don't do what it wants me to do, and then it just flows on down the river. And
Hmm.
that's how I look at shame now. And so if you do the hard work of untangling, you will get to that point of not allowing shame to sabotage you.
Real quick, if you are a therapist that's listening and you're thinking about your own practice, I want to tell you about something that has drastically improved my quality of life and the way that I run my practice. The thing is, I wouldn't even be able to have this conversation with Dr. Zoe if I were so bogged down with the things that used to weigh me down about my practice, the admin side. And that's where TherapyNotes comes in. It handles everything from billing to note taking to scheduling. So I can focus on doing the work I love with clients instead of having to be bogged down by the administrative tasks. If you're a therapist that wants to spend less time on admin and more time doing the work that really matters, check out TherapyNotes. You can use my code Dr. Therese for 2 free months to check it out, or just click on the link in the description. Now, let's get back to our conversation with Dr. Zoe.
So, Zoe, as I said, I have a lot of people in my audience who are high achievers and they struggle with imposter syndrome on the
Mm-hmm.
daily, myself
Yes.
included. So, how does complex shame show up for them? And what do you recommend for them in terms of, yeah, just the people that look like they've got it all going on the outside, but on the inside, they're like, do I even belong here? And,
Hmm.
you know, I feel like I can't do the things I'm setting out to do.
Yes. The first thing I want to say is that there's nothing new under the sun. And every single person that has come to me with imposter syndrome and complex shame has a story. So I think about my editor, who is amazing, amazing editor. And when she was reading my book, the early parts of my book, she was telling me, oh my goodness, I have this imposter syndrome. And she told me about her history, her story of, I think maybe it was dyslexia, or
Mm-hmm.
here's the interesting thing, I don't even remember her story. So think
Okay.
about that. The things
Mm-hmm.
that we hold so dear, the burdens that we hold, and we're so worried about other people knowing that we feel so shameful about. She shared it
Mm-hmm.
with me. I don't even remember what it was. I just know it was something to do with early learning and some type of maybe learning disorder that she had.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, even now, despite her degrees and despite her all of her success, she still has this sense of I'm not good enough if they knew, right, about my
Mm-hmm.
dyslexia or whatever it is that was going on with her.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sharing this because I actually have multiple editors, so you don't know who I'm talking about. Um,
Okay.
and the thing about imposter syndrome is that, yes, these stories that start usually early in our life
Mm-hmm.
somehow get attached. And often they're academic stories or experiences in school or learning about the thing that we're working in now. These stories get attached to what we're doing now. And often they don't even apply. But we've attached this line to, her dyslexia to
Mm-hmm.
where she is now. And it may not even have an effect except what we choose for it to have. And so we show up in these spaces almost with these little parts of us, right? The little
Mm-hmm.
parts of us that are feel shame about whatever we were told. Like if someone was told they can't write, or they're not good in math, or they failed something, or they were made fun of when they got up and spoke in front of people, whatever those little stories are, we show up in the boardrooms as those 8, 9, 10-year-old little people, imagining that we have to double down and work harder to be as good as the next person. But the reality is that most people, and research has shown this, most people experience imposter syndrome. And so you are sitting at that boardroom with 10 other people who are feeling the exact same thing.
Hmm.
And so the thing that I notice about women especially is a lot of our shame gets exposed in the way that we speak, especially when we're speaking in our professional self, speaking as our professional selves. And so women will often use a lot of hedging words when they speak. So, and this is one of the differences between men and women, and also one of the things that holds us back in terms of, achieving and moving up, is we defer to men more. And we also use these words like I think and maybe, perhaps. We always kind of qualify our words. It's like we
Right.
disqualify them before we even speak. And that
Mm-hmm.
is our imposter syndrome. And so one of the things I would like someone out there who might recognize, oh yeah, I feel all of those things, is pay attention to your hedging words. When you speak, speak with certainty. And yes, you don't know everything, but what you are talking about is something that matters to you, and it's okay to speak with certainty. Often what we do is we think, well, if we haven't done all the research on it, then I
Mm-hmm.
can't say that this thing is true. Men tend to not have that issue. They will speak with certainty
No.
about something they don't even know. And so we as women have to recognize that our shame keeps us from being able to really speak up in that way. So just
Mm.
say the same thing and work on taking out those hedging words.
Amen. I'm queen of using those in the past. I've tried to be more
Mhm.
mindful of it. And it's funny because even with clients, I will say, pretend you have the confidence of a mediocre white man.
Yes,
Because I
exactly.
mean, they do something one time and then they think they can start a podcast on it, no
Right.
degree,
Yes.
no nothing.
Nothing.
We need to
Nothing.
summon that kind of
Me
like
too.
confidence. But yeah, it's oh my gosh, it's so our words are so powerful, and so I
They
think
are.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that encouragement to really kind of find our confidence in our words and hold to that, and even just being aware of the ways that
Hmm.
we make ourselves small, even through the little things that we say before a
Yeah.
statement, like I think or maybe, trying to soften our power, I guess, is what it sounds like.
Yes. It's softening our power. Yes,
Hmm.
exactly. And understanding where it comes from, because then you can
Mm-hmm.
talk to that child who felt that thing, and you can understand that that line actually does not draw to where you are now. And if you can work on that part, then you'll naturally stop.
People would see you and they see you and you're a mother of five, you've got
Hmm.
a successful practice,
Hmm.
you are a published author times two now.
Yes.
What does healing look like for someone like you, who looks like to so many of us that you've just got it all figured out? um, yeah, where does the rubber meet the road for you? What's your healing today look like? I'd be so curious to know.
Oh, that's so good. So my journey has been messy. It has been
Mm-hmm.
so messy. Um, on, so on the outside, yes, it has looked all put together, but my
Mm-hmm.
internal journey has been very messy. But now, healing today just looks like it's no longer being willing to sacrifice myself or abandon myself for someone else, period. Anytime I recognize that I am beginning to abandon myself for someone else, I stop. And there is a difference. And for women out there, I know, because we are socialized to care for, we are socialized to self sacrifice, we are
Mm-hmm.
socialized to do all those things and nurture. And that is good. That is a
Mm-hmm.
healthy part of our femininity. But there is a line and there is a difference. You can sacrifice and you can help and you can nurture without abandoning yourself. When it
Mm.
moves towards self abandonment, that is the line that in my health now, my
Mm.
journey of health, I will not cross.
Mm. Why is that so hard sometimes? I mean, I feel like I'm in my 40s now, and I feel like that journey I feel like I'm starting to get there, you know, at
Mm-hmm.
43.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but gosh, why is it that we defer to abandoning ourselves? You actually said something earlier. So what you said was mistaking being needed for being loved. And
Oh,
and
yeah.
I feel like the losing ourselves process occurs in this space as well.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to that? Can you unpack that a little bit more?
Yes. So the first thing I want to say about codependency is that so many people, when they think about codependent, it sounds like such a weak statement, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
codependent people are weak. And what I
Mm-hmm.
have found is that codependent people are some of the strongest women,
Mm-hmm.
some of the most high achievers externally. And the reason why is because this codependence is a survival mechanism, right?
Mm-hmm.
What we do is we work super hard to control everyone else's emotions around us. That takes a lot of strength and work. And the reason why is because we believe, and we do confuse this sense of being needed with love, because sometimes maybe that's all we experienced, right?
Mm-hmm.
We haven't experienced healthy love. But we convince ourselves if I can make them all okay, then I will feel okay. And so it's this actual super controlling thing. When people think about codependence, they don't think about control, but that's really what it is. It's a super controlling desire to make
Mm-hmm.
everyone else okay so that you're okay. And so in doing that, once again, you are not allowing yourself to be loved because your value in relationships becomes about how you can make other people feel as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to other people loving you for who you are. And so many women in these codependent relationships don't get that experience of love. Now what happens is, and the fear is that if I show up as I am, if I demand what I deserve, right, in a relationship, if I have healthy boundaries, then I will lose my people.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the problem is that there is some truth in that because you've created a dynamic where your value in a relationship is about what you can do for them as opposed to who you are.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, if there's enough health in a relationship, when you begin to demand what you deserve, when you begin to show up as yourself and not attempt to for your words to create an emotional experience for somebody else, which means I can have my experience, they can have their experience. I can say something that upsets them and it doesn't have to upset me,
Mm-hmm.
right? When you can get to that point, then you often what happens is that the relationship rises.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at a relationship as a system, which all relationships are, all
Mm-hmm.
systems seek equilibrium, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when you begin to change, you make these weird changes, all of a sudden you have desires and wants and what want matters. Okay, you've just
Mm-hmm.
now made a big change in the relationship and so you've got this disparity. And so
Mm-hmm.
the system will drive to bring you back to equilibrium, which means when you set boundaries, people get worse. And that's the hard thing. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what convinces you that boundaries don't work. But if you can hold yourself there, hold the boundary instead of giving in, the system strives for equilibrium. So eventually they will come to you. And
Mm-hmm.
a healthy enough relationship, if you are able to wait it out. And then all of a sudden you have a relationship that is based on reciprocity and equality
Mm-hmm.
and a mutual care.
Yeah, that whole upsetting the system thing can be so difficult because I think it triggers all of the fears about being loved. And
Yes,
and I'm
yes.
realizing as we're talking about this that like so much that we do is about that
Mhm.
innate desire to be loved. And
Yes.
I wonder if we could go back to one of your other types of shame that you shared about, which was related to body shame.
Hmm.
I think this comes up for so many women. I grew up in California. I think we both, well, no, you didn't, but you live
Oh,
in
Marilyn.
California now. So we've
Yeah.
both been exposed to this like ridiculous culture with expectations that are unachievable and
Yep.
unattainable for our body.
Yes.
And I know that I struggled so much. Like I think I didn't even feel comfortable going to a pool in a swimsuit until I was 35. I distinctly remember being 35 and being like, I feel okay in a bathing suit today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's just so pervasive. It's
It is.
so deeply embedded.
Yeah.
Um, and I think one of the things I noticed, because you're talking about almost like destination anxiety applied to love. Like, if I do X, then I will be loved.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people struggle with, if I am thinner or if I'm prettier or if I'm this or that, then I will be loved. And it's so
Mhm.
debilitating. And I'm curious for like the women that you work with who are in this place where they're really stuck in these, because these body shame narratives are so embedded. Um, what do you usually talk about with them? I mean, I know there's so many different things to discuss in something like that, but like, what are some of the things that you notice that are important to talk about when someone is so stuck in that shame around their body?
Yeah. The first thing I want to do is I want to honor that natural drive, desire,
Mm-hmm.
even urgent, urgency to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
That is healthy. That is normal. That is what we need as humans. So sometimes, people will just say, "Oh, you don't need that." And my answer is, "Yeah, we do. And it's okay that we seek it out.
Mm-hmm.
We do deserve that." So I want to honor that. The thing is that we attach that ability to be loved to this external thing that has nothing to do with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we don't trust ourselves. And so when it comes to body, we'll talk about body shame especially. If they see my body, they will judge me unworthy. If I am judged unworthy, then I will not be loved, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so part of it is a combination of trusting others to be human and trusting yourself to love yourself, to be able to accept rejection. So it's not, it's being able to hold both of these things like I need love.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I trust that if I am rejected, I will be okay. And I also trust that other people are human just like me. And
Mm-hmm.
there's really nothing very different about this body that I feel shame about. It's just these false narratives, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's a combo of trusting self,
Mm-hmm.
trusting humanity on another level, but also recognizing I don't have to trust that you won't reject me because I know even if you do reject me, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
speaking up or whether it's showing my body, I know I will be okay. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
hard place to get to. But when you can get to that place of, I know I will be okay if they reject me, then all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden it doesn't matter if you expose yourself.
It sounds, I've seen people do what they're calling like rejection therapy, where I don't know if you've seen this on social media, like someone will go and like lay on a street corner and do something really weird and have to endure like how people respond. I'm fascinated by these videos because they really do something powerful to
They do.
invite people to step into those places where they're terrified and do something where
Mhm.
they put themselves in the line of fire, quote unquote. Um, yeah, rejection. So much, I think so much of us is controlled by our fear of rejection. And to be
Right.
able to have power over that, kind of flip the script, it kind of does sound like it would change everything, doesn't it?
It does, and it would. And,
Mm-hmm.
the power of shame is the fear of rejection. That's exactly what
Mm-hmm.
it is. And it's
Mm-hmm.
funny that you said that because part of my healing from shame, part of that journey,
Mm-hmm.
there's many, many facets of it. But I read
Mm-hmm.
this book by Zhao Zhang called Rejection Proof. And in
Okay.
that book, he spent a year essentially seeking rejection. And it was a turning point for me because I
Mm-hmm.
started doing things that I was afraid to do before because of that feeling of rejection. And it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing what it afforded me. I think right after I read that book, I contacted this magazine and asked them if I could have a column, advice column, and they said yes.
Oh my
And
God.
yes, and that was part of, just working through my own imposter syndrome, shame, all of those
Mm-hmm.
things, and that fear
Mm-hmm.
of being rejected. And now, actually, this year, I've started something personally. I haven't talked about it publicly, and my goal is to get 100 rejections this year. And
Wow.
and pitching and
Mm-hmm.
writing and speaking, all of those things, because if I'm trying really hard to get rejected, that means I am putting myself out there in ways that I wouldn't before. And I think I've only got about 30, and I've tried really hard, but I've gotten some amazing wins as a result. And So a little part of working on your shame is also working on that fear of rejection.
Oh my
It's not
gosh,
as bad as
this
you think.
this is amazing. I'm so inspired. Maybe this is something I want to invite the people listening to try this for yourself, maybe, and see how it is and report back in terms of how it goes for you. That is so funny that you are, you're trying your hardest to get rejected and you're getting all these big wins along the way.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
but I mean, oh my gosh, the boldness to just ask for a column and to get it. I think we leave
Hmm.
so many things on the table.
We
And
do. Yes.
yeah, this is so cool. It's kind of like honing a superpower to not care. And as
Hmm.
someone who has been raised to care
Yeah.
very much,
Hmm.
like this is revolutionary. And yeah, I just, gosh, there's just so much that you're inspiring me to think about here. I want to ask you about something, and this is kind of, you know, very random, but I work with a lot of Gen Zers, and
Hmm.
I love them so much. An amazing
Yes.
generation. I know your kids are some, right?
Yep.
And one of the things that comes up a lot in their language, because this is a social media generation, is the idea of cringe. And I feel
Oh.
like I feel like cringe comes up so much, and I realize now it's so connected to this conversation about shame. What are your thoughts on cringe, Zoe? Like, is this a thing we should care about? Is it real?
I think we should. And it's funny because my daughter, who's 12,
Hmm.
we were riding in the car and we were talking about something. She's like, "Oh, you're a hater." I'm like, "I'm not a hater." And I'm trying to remember what I was talking about. I
Uh-huh.
don't even remember what I was talking about. Something that was, and I tried to explain to her, criticizing something is not the same as hating something,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
And I think these words, and I was actually talking to her about words and meanings of words and how the meaning has changed.
Hmm.
Where, if you have any even constructive criticism, now this generation is saying you are a hater. And
Hmm.
so the same thing with cringe. Cringe, I think, is actually a beautiful explanation of the physiological response to shame, right?
Hmm.
That shame that sometimes, we have this kind of, we feel for somebody else and that creates a cringe in us, or we're experiencing shame and we're cringing. And so I actually think it's a wonderful word, but it's just an example of how pervasive shame is in our society, and even more so with the internet, with social
Hmm.
media, because
Hmm.
shame is a social construct. And
Hmm.
so the thing about shame is that in the absence of people, we don't feel it. If you're sitting in your room naked, reading a book, you don't even think about it. If
Hmm.
someone walks in the room, what happens? We cover
Uh-huh.
ourselves, right? And
Hmm.
so the thing is that now we are continually having this social experience in our bedrooms, in the places
Wow.
where we would generally not feel shame. And
Hmm.
so I think that they're just creating a language for their experience. And I think cringe is a wonderful word to describe that physiological response.
So it's like you're making me realize though that like there's so many more opportunities for shame because
Yes,
of this
yes.
visibility that
Yep.
we're having as it increases with every social media
Mhm.
platform. How do you how can you try for people listening who have little ones, like how do you
Mm.
raise less ashamed
Yes.
children?
Oh, I love that question. I love that question. So if we think back to the difference between shame and guilt,
Hmm.
guilt's a healthy emotion when it's valid, shame's
Hmm.
not. So what we want to do, it's very simple, and yet you might notice that you don't do it a lot in your life, is when you talk to your children, talk to them about their behavior. Don't talk to them about who they are.
Hmm.
They are not lazy or messy or, hyper or frustrating, whatever it is that you
Hmm.
may, in some ways, insinuate. Because here's the thing, I think a lot of parents know now not to call their children lazy, not to call their children names
Hmm.
necessarily.
Hmm.
But what we don't understand is that the messages that we receive and incorporate so deeply into ourselves and our lives and our childhood were often never spoken to us. Those are the ones we hold most strongly. They were
Hmm.
insinuated by
Hmm.
tone, by body language, by other words.
All the
Maybe no one ever called,
nonverbals.
yes, maybe
Hmm.
no one ever called you stupid, but
Hmm.
children can feel if you're insinuating that. So
Mm.
my point is that as a parent, pay attention to just the behavior. Like, oh, there are lots of things on your floor. Let's pick them up. As opposed to
Mm-hmm.
this room is so messy, you're so messy, that type of thing. If
Mm-hmm.
you pay attention to a behavior, there's something your child can do.
Mm-hmm.
If you attribute a characteristic to your child, then all they're going to want to do is hide. So just as you talk to your children, talk to them about behaviors and what they
Mm-hmm.
can do to do differently. And
Mm-hmm.
then when you talk to them globally about who they are, lift them up. Tell them
Mm-hmm.
how wonderful, generous, smart they are. And that way, their story of their identity is going to be very different, even if they understand that they have behaviors they need to work on.
Focus on the behavior and not on their global characteristics when you're
Correct.
criticizing
Yes.
something. That's I think that's very simple and very
Mhm.
like
Very simple.
applicable. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Zoe. Um, and now I'm thinking about people who might be in positions to help other people through this
Hmm.
conversation. You mentioned some things earlier where I didn't even realize that therapists, or friends who really care about someone in their life dealing with shame, how we can actually inadvertently contribute to the problem.
Yes. Yes.
And I know that people listening are people who want to help and
Absolutely.
and and make things actually better. What do they need to know? What do they need to not do? What do they need to flip in their approach to actually be more effective at helping someone who's navigating through a shame story?
I think once again, it's also very simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's do not blanketly tell somebody it wasn't your fault or you didn't mean to,
Mm-hmm.
or just don't try to exonerate them so quickly
Okay.
because they're not able to exonerate themselves or even accept it. So
Mm-hmm.
our drive is to make it okay. Our drive is to exonerate them so that we feel
Mm-hmm.
better and we're making them feel better. Instead,
Right.
listen to the story. Be curious, ask them questions. See if you can understand, depending on how close you are to them, about the blame that they put on themselves. Ask them how they can forgive themselves, which
Mm-hmm.
can be feel hard when your drive and our drive as humans is to placate them, is to try to make them feel better. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying instead go deeper with them.
There's that curiosity piece coming up again, and I think
Hmm.
what I heard and what you were saying also is like I've noticed with my clients as well. Sometimes it's about soothing our own anxieties, about needing to make the
Yes.
problem go away.
Yes,
And
that's
if we can
exactly
soothe
what
our,
it is.
okay, cool. Yeah. So then
Hmm.
if we can soothe our own anxieties, then we can actually sit with someone else in their difficulties and be more present for them instead of trying to just make it disappear. My mission, which I've talked about a lot before, is that I want to help people love their lives so they never want to leave them. And Zoe, I'm just wondering if you in your journey have ever felt like you didn't want to necessarily be here or living the life that you had. And if you did feel that way, what helped you want to stay? What helped you want to persevere through that?
First, Therese, when you said that, I thought about your brother. And I just thought, wow, what a message and what an idea to even put in someone's mind to love your life so that you never want to leave it. I love that. So thank
Mm-hmm.
you. Thank you for that. Um, because that's something it's an easy statement that we can just work on cultivating, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
to answer your question, yes, I think there have been multiple times in my life
Mm-hmm.
that I have even thought about suicide, that
Mm-hmm.
I have not wanted to live the life I was living in that big way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably in those younger years when I was really experiencing a lot of my own internal, my trauma, really.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think in my middle years, there was definitely a sense of how did I get here? How did my life
Mm-hmm.
become this thing that I didn't want or didn't plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of I don't want to live this life. And I had to make some really hard decisions. I had to be willing to set boundaries, speak up in relationships in order to not live the life that I didn't want to live anymore. And that's
Mm-hmm.
so scary.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not easily done. But the amazing joy and gratitude towards myself for doing the work and love and freedom that I have now, I am not recognizable. Like I don't recognize that woman who lived in a life that she hated, really. So I don't remember exactly what your question is, but have I been there? 100%. And am I on the other side? Yes.
No, you spoke to it, I think, in so many ways. I mean, um, it was asking you what made you want to stay, and it sounds like you worked to cultivate things worth staying for. Relationships is what you said that jumped out in my mind. I know that you're in a very different place now than you were back then, and relationally, with your family, but there's been some hard things that you've gotten through. I think when I hear you talk about some of the harder parts of your journey, I'm struck by how you found a way to to connect with your own sense of power to make some changes, right? And to remember that that was possible. And it's just so inspiring because, again, like I see you as this woman who just has it all. You have so many of the things in life that I admire or would want for myself and would love to cultivate. Not to mention, knowing you and all of your friends, like um, we see you as just such a source of wisdom and inspiration. So I'm just moved. Thank you for sharing that because I think to hear someone like you talk about how there were moments in life where you didn't maybe even want to be living the life that you had. I think for someone who's going through a low, that's incredibly uplifting and inspiring to remember. So I really want to thank you for going there and for sharing that.
You're
Um,
welcome. But I also want to say something else for that person because I don't think I
mhm,
answered the part about what made me want to stay.
mhm,
And I talk about this a little bit in my book, and it's what I call that small flame, that spark that
mhm,
we all have inside of us. And despite all of the negative words and voices, there was still that piece that I knew deep down, number one, they weren't true, and that there was something there. And so we all have it. It's just a matter of trying to uncover it because it's probably buried deep. But if you can kind of access that small little flame that knows better, that
mhm,
knows that there's something that you have to offer the world, that there's something um, that is valuable in you, despite what other messages say. That little
mhm.
small flame is the thing that can keep you working towards creating the life that you wanna live for.
I think that this conversation hopefully has stoked that small flame in a lot of people that have joined us today. Zoe, I know we could talk so much more. And I know people are going to want to learn more about those 9 steps you shared, that
Mhm.
can help us overcome our complex shame. But can you tell us if, when people are ready to know more about you? I know it's going to happen soon. Where can they find you? Where can they find you and get your book?
Yeah, so you can find me. I hang out on Instagram. That's my social place, and it's just
Hmm.
Dr. Zoe Shaw, ZoeShaw is my handle. And same with my website. It's the same thing. And my book, Stronger in the Difficult Places, you can get.
There
Oh,
it
yes, there it is.
is.
You can get it at all places where books are sold.
That's such a cool thing to be able to say.
Yeah,
I love that so much.
it's really
Um,
exciting.
can I ask you one more question, Zoe? So,
Yes, of course.
um, if there's just, any final words that you could leave with the listeners that have been with us in this conversation today, people
Mm,
that are maybe even sitting with shame right now about something in
yep,
their lives,
yeah.
is there anything you would share with them or would want them to know?
I think I just want them to know that there's hope. That no matter what you've done, no matter what's been done to you, no matter how you feel right now, even in this moment, there is hope that you can overcome this and live a life of freedom so that you can have healthy love. Um, it's work, but there's hope. And that's all I want to leave someone with is knowing that it doesn't matter what you're feeling or experiencing. There's hope for it.
So, Zoe, I just want to thank you. Thank you for the
Thank
wisdom and the
you.
insights. And again, please check out Zoe's book, Stronger in the Difficult Places. I know you're going to want to read this to anyone that's listening. And Zoe, also thank you for helping me with my very first interview on this podcast
Yes.
and just giving us so much to think about and to inspire us. It's been so much fun having you here. So, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Therese. This has been amazing, an amazing honor to be your first guest. Thank you.
Can we just sit with what Dr. Zoe shared for a moment? Because here's what's staying with me from this conversation. Complex shame doesn't heal the way simple shame does. You can be vulnerable, you can receive compassion, and if you have complex shame, your internal response is the same, but you don't really understand. If you really knew me, you wouldn't be giving me this compassion. That's the difference. That's why some of us have done all the right things and still feel stuck. And here's the other thing that is sticking with me today. Dr. Zoe experiences shame every single day, but she's also healed enough so that when it shows up, she sees it, she recognizes it, and she refuses to do the one thing that it wants her to do: hide. And she watches that shame flow past her like water in a river. It's not shame disappearing, it's a completely different relationship with shame, and it's so freeing. If you're taking notes, and I hope you are, here's what you need to walk away with. First, find your shame by noticing when you want to hide. Anytime you think, I don't want them to see that, or I don't want them to know, that's where your shame is. Now you have a tool to find it. Second, pay attention to your words. If you're using hedging language, I think, maybe, perhaps, you're softening your power. Speak with certainty about the things that matter to you. You don't need to qualify your worth before you speak. Third, get curious about your shame story without blaming yourself. This is the nuance Dr. Zoe taught us about. Taking accountability isn't the same as self-blame. It's about understanding that behavior makes sense in context and then forgiving yourself by giving up on hope of a better past. And finally, consider seeking rejection. I know that sounds wild, but Dr. Zoe is actively trying to get 100 rejections this year. And what's so cool is that she's gotten some of her biggest wins along the way. Because if you're trying hard to get rejected, then it means you're putting yourself out there in ways that you've never tried before. Listen, if you've been carrying complex shame, it's not because you haven't been trying hard enough to heal. It's not because you're broken beyond repair. It's because you're using tools for simple shame on a much more complex problem. Dr. Zoe's book, Stronger in the Difficult Places, gives you 9 steps to untangle it. And if you need professional support, please reach out. This work can be so challenging, but it's so worth it. And if this conversation hit home for you, I want to invite you to join my Substack community. Every week, I share insights just like this, practical wisdom to help you build a life you don't need a vacation from. And if you're a therapist, check out TherapyNotes using code Dr. Therese for 2 months free. The link is in the description. Before I let you go, your shame story does not disqualify you from success, from love, or from freedom. It's just one chapter in a much bigger story, and you get to decide what comes next. Start small. Notice where you're hiding. Be willing to speak with certainty. And remember, healing isn't about making shame disappear. It's about changing your relationship with it so it no longer controls you. Dr. Zoe, thank you for being here for this episode, for sharing your story, and for teaching us how to be stronger in the difficult places. Thanks for checking in with me today, and I'll see you next Thursday.